All right, welcome back everyone to History for the Ages. Again, I'd love more people to find my channel. Please feel free to subscribe and like and share all these lectures that I've been doing. So this is one that's very interesting. Why the Electoral College? Even though most of my lectures are about Western civilization and the history of the Middle East, this is something, of course, pertaining to U.S. history, and it's a question that I often get, especially around election time. And it is one of the most misunderstood aspects of American politics. Why do we do this system where we'll have a presidential election and sometimes, and it's happened more than once, the person who wins the popular votes doesn't become the president? And I get why people don't understand it. Sometimes they say, I don't like it, especially if you're on the losing side of it. But there is a reason for it. And what I hope I can do in this short lecture is at least explain why it happens. It's always up to you guys to decide if it's good or if it's bad, but at least if you have an understanding of where it comes from, it helps to kind of understand the system. And I always say this, it's kind of a line from, I think, Winston Churchill. He said, democracy is the worst form of government except all the others. And there's something to that, there's no perfect system, but at least hopefully you'll kind of understand how it works. And my goal is to be able to explain this with just really one slide and a few images. So let's go to the slide that I want to show. All right, guys, so these are the maps I like to use to try to explain why we use the Electoral College system and to understand where the thinking comes from. So these are election maps, right? And you got 2008 here, 2012, and 2016. The bottom is what we normally see in most elections, the state by state, how each candidate wins a state. Now, basic election 101, how does a candidate win the electoral votes in a state? By winning the most popular votes within a state, you get all the electoral votes. Generally, there are a couple states that are exceptions, but generally that's how it works. And so it doesn't matter if you win a state by 10 million votes or if you win a state by 200 votes. If you win that state, you get all the Electoral College votes in that state. Back in the election between Gore and Bush the younger, in the state of Florida, Bush won that state by literally just hundreds of votes. It was that close, right? And generally, candidates win states by tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, but sometimes they may win a state by millions of votes. So if you take a state like California, right? California, and so this is the 2016 election, the Trump-Clinton election. And in that election, Hillary Clinton won the popular vote. President Trump won the Electoral College vote. And you could see 279, 228 in a significant enough manner. But Clinton won the popular vote. And the reason is, you take a state like California, and California, Hillary Clinton won that state by millions and millions of votes, right? And so that really gives her a big bump in popular votes. And some of these other states that Trump won, Ohio, Pennsylvania, some of these other states you see in red, North Carolina, he won those states, but not by millions and millions and millions of votes, maybe tens of thousands of votes, right? So that's where you start to get the discrepancy. And, he gets all the Electoral College votes in those states, even though he barely won them. Now, why do we do that? So let's go to the top. And on the top, you see the same map, but a county by county breakdown. And what you see on the top is, I think, one of the reasons, the one I want to focus on here, of why we use the Electoral College system. What you're looking at top is a county by county breakdown. And what you see is a lot of red. It's almost all red. And why is that? That's because that's a county map and it's rural and urban. The blue counties tend to be the urban counties, and the red counties tend to be the rural counties. The rural counties tend to be more conservative. The blue counties tend to be more liberal. The rural counties are not densely populated, not a lot of people living in them, but they encompass a bunch of land. The urban counties don't take up a lot of real estate, but they're very densely populated. So a city like LA may not be massive in land mass, it's a pretty good chunk, but it's very densely populated. Lots of people, small area, right? As opposed to rural areas, which you see in a lot of the red states, which encompass, millions and millions of acres, or hundreds of thousands of acres. My geography may be a little bit off, I apologize. Hundreds of thousands of acres, right? But not densely populated. And so if we used a strict popular vote, what would politicians do? They would only focus on the densely populated urban areas. And they would simply try to get the votes from where most people lived. And you go, okay, what's the problem with that? The problem with that is after a couple generations of that, and politicians saying, well, what do I care about all these red counties? There's barely anybody who lives in these areas, right? All this chunk here, why do I care? Nobody lives there, right? I'm just going to focus all my energy in these blue counties because that's where everybody lives. And I'm going to campaign to what they want and what they like and what they want to hear. Well, those red counties who have a very different value system than the blue counties are very quickly going to be ignored. And after a generation or two, they're going to feel, well, what about us? This America, this United States of America, doesn't represent us at all. They don't represent our values, our beliefs, our ideas. They simply only care about these small urban counties that are, again, densely populated. And after a while, they're going to feel, as I said, alienated, and they're going to go, well, we don't even want to be part of this system anymore. And that's where you end up with conflict and division. And you may be in one of these urban blue areas and go, what do I care? Well, you got to think of the bigger picture. And you know, one of the things that's interesting is this goes back all the way to our founding. You know, if you think of our congressional system, we have the House and we have the Senate. Right? And it doesn't matter if you're a state with a massive population, again, like California, you get 2 senators. And you're a tiny state like Alaska with very few population, you get 2 senators. Even though Alaska geographically is massive, it doesn't have a large population. You still get 2 senators. However, we have a House system where if you're a very populated state, you get a lot of House seats. And if you're not a populated state, you don't get a lot of House seats. So why did our founding fathers do that? It was a compromise. It was the idea, well, the big states get a voice through the House of Representatives, and the small states get a voice because, you know, they get a say in the Senate, a bigger voice in the Senate per capita to help, you know, their rights, so they're not ignored. So this is not kind of some concept that they just picked out of thin air. They really thought about this. So I get why people might get frustrated if they live in a blue county or a blue state and go, wait a second, you know, my voice isn't heard as often. Yes, that sometimes is true. Blue counties, you have a lot of people in there, but the reason, you know, those urban counties, you know, can't dominate every single election if that ends up happening is politicians would even care less about rural areas and they would simply focus on their urban areas. And that's where you get the divide. Now, of course, I don't remember if I already mentioned this, but are there exceptions? Of course. There are people who live in these red counties that are liberal, and there are people who live in the blue counties who are conservative. And so that still forces politicians to try to campaign in a lot of places in different areas. And another, you know, criticism of the Electoral College system, they go, well, you know, a state like California, everybody knows it's a blue state, so politicians don't campaign there. In a state like Texas, everybody knows it's a red state, so politicians don't campaign there as much. And that's true. That is a fair criticism, right? As opposed to if it's a popular vote, they would campaign everywhere. But this is also true. Things change, right? There was a point where California was a red state, right? If you remember back when Ronald Reagan was president. And so things do change. And so one year, one state might be, you know, a center, a battleground state. Another year, another state might become a battleground state because demographics change and places change. But if you, so that does force, at least over time, for campaigns to kind of campaign in different areas and care about different states. But if you go to a strict popular vote, campaigns are never going to care about the rural areas anymore. They're going to say, bye-bye, I don't care about you. And after time, I think that would create a lot of alienation. So at least that's kind of a little bit of thought of why we use the Electoral College system. Again, there's a lot of other ideas behind it, but I do think, you know, at least one of the core ideas is this rural-urban area. So I hope that was clear. I hope that kind of gave you something to think about. If you have questions about it, put it in the comments, right? And maybe it can be a kind of more discussions on it there. All right, thank you for listening. Hope everyone has a great day. Thank you.